Welcome to the Heartland Baptist Podcast. I'm Steve Swan, one of the pastors here at Heartland.
And I'm Joel Carla, also one of the pastors here at Heartland.
You can expect on this feed to hear the Sunday morning teaching from Heartland, usually from either Joel or I.
But sometimes from awesome guest speakers as well. If you want to get in touch with us to find out more about our church, if you have something that you'd like us to pray about, or you just want to say hi, visit us online at heartlandbaptist.ca.
And if you don't want to miss anything, subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app. We also have a YouTube page if you prefer video, which is just at youtube.com/the@ Heartland and Heartland Baptist.
Right now we're going through the book of John together as a church, so enjoy the podcast as we dive deep into God's Word together.
I'm gonna say a word that you might not hear in church all that often. Well, I'm nervous to talk about it, if I'm honest with you. The word is politics. I know. I'm with you. I really enjoy talking about politics as like an intellectual exercise. I like analyze it. I find it fascinating. But I don't really like engaging with politics as like someone who's got any kind of skin in the game. Like you'll never see me attending like a political rally or purchasing a party membership. Because and this is just me. I've never really felt like there's any political party out there that really aligns with my faith and priorities. And politics really seems like kind of a nasty thing to be a part of anyway. So even locally, the last like week or two, just seems like usually like city council, not that exciting. But there's been some nastiness. It just doesn't seem like a pleasant thing to be a part of. And to be a politician means that you're going to be in the public eye. People will say terrible things about you. You will have a target on your back, and in some cases that has been literal. So why on earth would anyone want to become a politician? Well, I'll let someone better equipped than Steve Swan tell you that. Vaclav, I might not be saying his name right. Vaclav Havel was the first president of then Czechoslovakia post-communism. He was instrumental in bringing democracy to that country and he first led Czechoslovakia, and then when the Czech Republic and Slovakia separated, he led the Czech Republic for more than a decade. And he gave a very honest speech about 3 reasons why people get into politics. And you'll really only ever hear a politician tell you the first reason. But there's 3 reasons. Here's what he said. He said, in the first place, people are driven into politics by ideas about a better way to organize society, by faith in certain values or ideals, be they impeccable or dubious, and the irresistible desire to fight for those ideas and turn them into reality. We've all heard politicians talk like that, right? Here's the second reason that Havel said. He says, in the second place, they are probably motivated by the natural longing every human being has for self-affirmation. Is it possible to imagine a more attractive way to affirm your own existence and importance than that offered by political power? In essence, it gives you a tremendous opportunity to leave your mark in the broadest sense on your surroundings, to shape the world around you in your image. Yeah. That's reason number 2. Again, you're not going to hear a politician say that, are you? But this is what the president of Czechoslovakia said. And in the third place, here's what he said. Many people long for political power and are so reluctant to part with it because of the wide range of perks that are a necessary part of political life, even under the most democratic of conditions. So one thing that you will very rarely see is a politician give up power willingly. Right? Like I'm not going to say never, but even in the last election cycle, our former prime minister, even in the face of disastrous polling numbers, was planning on running again. Until his party, seeing their own power begin to slip away, got rid of him, pushed him out. Most times when politicians resign or leave, It's when they have no chance of winning, and especially in a democracy, right? It's not because of the first reason, it's because of the second too. Now, in Jesus' time, of course, democracy didn't exist. But politics, the religious politics of the Jewish people and the politics of the Roman Empire certainly did. And they comprised the height of political power in Jesus' time. And our system of government might have changed, but power dynamics have not changed much. So whether in Jerusalem or Prince George or Victoria or Ottawa, human power clings to itself. But in John 18, we see something different from Jesus. Jesus stands before the highest powers in his land, and instead of grasping for power, he gives it up. He lays it down and reveals the truth about himself. If you missed the last time we were together 2 weeks ago, we talked through Peter's denials, which are sort of interwoven throughout this story. And we're going to touch just briefly on Peter's denials here this morning, because we dealt with them more fully last time. So I'm going to omit those from the reading this morning. But let's read together from John chapter 18, beginning in verse 19. It says this, inside, the high priest began asking Jesus about his followers and what he had been teaching them. Jesus replied, "Everyone knows what I teach. I have preached regularly in the synagogues and the temple where the people gather. I have not spoken in secret. Why are you asking me this question? Ask those who heard me. They know what I said." Then one of the temple guards, standing nearby, slapped Jesus across the face. "Is that the way to answer the high priest?" he demanded. Jesus replied, "If I said anything wrong, you must prove it. But if I'm speaking the truth, why are you beating me?" Then Annas bound Jesus and sent him to Caiaphas, the high priest. We're going to skip down to verse 28. Jesus' trial before Caiaphas ended in the early hours of the morning. Then he was taken to the headquarters of the Roman governor. His accusers didn't go inside because it would defile them, and they wouldn't be allowed to celebrate the Passover. So Pilate, the governor, went out to them and asked, "What is your charge against this man? We wouldn't have handed him over to you if he weren't a criminal," they retorted. "Then take him away and judge him by your own law," Pilate told them. "Only the Romans are permitted to execute someone," the Jewish leaders replied. This fulfilled Jesus' prediction about the way he would die. Then Pilate went back into his headquarters and called for Jesus to be brought to him. "Are you the king of the Jews?" he asked. Jesus replied, "Is this your own question, or did others tell you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate retorted. "Your own people and their leading priests brought you to me for trial. Why? What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not an earthly kingdom. If it were, my followers would fight to keep me from being handed over to the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is not of this world." Pilate said, "So you are a king?" Jesus responded, "You say I'm a king. Actually, I was born and came into this world to testify to the truth. All who love the truth recognize that what I say is true." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. Then he went out again to the people and told them, "He is not guilty of any crime, but you have a custom of asking me to release one prisoner each year at Passover. Would you like me to release the king of the Jews?" But they shouted back, "No, not this man. We want Barabbas." Barabbas was a revolutionary. Let's look first at the trial, and I use that word very loosely with Annas. Annas and Caiaphas were the height of religious power in Jesus' time. It shouldn't be a surprise to you, if you've joined us for any part of our series in John, that the height of religious power in Jesus' time were not very happy with Jesus. He was regularly in conflict with those religious leaders, with the religious powers. He openly challenged their understanding of who God is, what he wanted from them, how to live life. And openly challenging established political power is a surefire way to make some enemies, and Jesus did. But the reason that Jesus was called before Annas and Caiaphas was not because he said some things that they didn't like, but because the movement that he had led was becoming a threat. It was becoming dangerous to their power. The triumphal entry into Jerusalem happened a week ago. It would not have gone unnoticed. And so now we have this scene of Jesus and Annas. That's interesting to me, that in the face of power, in the face of pressure, Jesus remains true. Both in the words that he said and in what he did. He answers truthfully. He tells Annas that there was nothing secret taught, that he wasn't teaching one thing publicly and another privately. He basically tells Annas that they already know the answer to the question. There isn't anything more to tell. And then he gets smacked by the guard. He tells the truth to these people who are in power. He tells the truth to under pressure. And the way that he responds to the guard testifies to the truth about himself. In this whole interaction, we see Jesus, in the face of all the power of the religious system of the day, be what he claimed to be: the truth. It's an interesting contrast to the story of Peter, isn't it? I think that's why it's woven in here. I think that's John's intent. Jesus, facing the high priest, facing the height of religious and political power in Israel, stood firm in the truth. Stood firm in who he was. He affirmed and confirmed that to those authorities that he was indeed a threat to their power. Peter, when faced with a question from a servant girl, lied. He crumbled. He sinned. He denied Jesus. Every disciple of Jesus, every follower of Jesus faces these two pathways, these two choices, don't we? Courage or compromise. Witness or self-protection. And if we're honest, I think there's times when we're Peter in that situation. There's times, hopefully, when we stand like Jesus. But Jesus' faithfulness is for people who fail. And we looked at that last time we were together. Yeah, it's interesting to me. If you look at other religions, it doesn't really matter if their stories are true. Islam, for example, doesn't hinge on whether stories about Muhammad are true. Islam is primarily a set of teachings, a set of laws about how you order your life. If you take away the stories of Muhammad, Islam still, quote-unquote, works. Buddhism has stories about the Buddha. And Buddhism has some beautiful ideas and philosophies about life and about the nature of suffering and desire. But if you want to follow Buddhism, it doesn't really matter if the stories about Buddha are true. In fact, many of those stories contradict each other. It doesn't have any impact on a Buddhist. Jesus is different. For a Jesus follower, it matters if the stories about Jesus are true. Because Jesus doesn't just teach a way to experience God, a way to experience the divine. Jesus says, I am the way to God. Jesus doesn't teach doesn't just teach helpful principles about how to order your life. He says, I am the life. And Jesus doesn't just say, these things that I teach are true. He says, I am the truth. Here in the story, Jesus doesn't really say anything to the high priest, but in doing so, he tells the truth about who he is. He reveals the truth about who he is to power. He reveals himself to power, and the high priest recognizes it as a threat to his own power. Let's skip down to the story of Pilate. So Pilate was the Roman governor. His conversation with Jesus is much different than the conversation he had with Annas. And Pilate, too, assesses whether Jesus is a threat to his or Rome's political power. And at first, Pilate doesn't think so. We don't really know how concerned Pilate was with Jewish religious politics, but it's pretty clear that he was not really interested in truth as a concept, right? That's pretty clear. For Pilate, Jesus might be claiming to be a king, but if his followers aren't trying to overthrow the government, if his followers aren't rising up in violence, he doesn't really care. The picture I have of Pilate is of a pragmatic man, annoyed maybe by the religious politics of the day. He doesn't find Jesus guilty, but rather than, again, risk a riot, risk a threat to his power, he makes a decision based on the greatest threat to his own power and releases Barabbas, not Jesus, in spite of the truth. What is truth? Pilate asked Jesus that question. I think it's an important one for us to wrestle with. I think we make a mistake sometimes, and we can think about truth. I don't know, maybe this is just limited to the English language, but we can have a too narrow a view of truth, I think. If we think about truth as just things that are factual, I think that's too narrow. I don't think that's what the Bible is talking about here. Because I think if we define truth in that way, we exclude whole books of the Bible from truth. It excludes poetry, it excludes art, it excludes music. Now, it's easy for us to be cynical about truth in the world we live in, isn't it? I'm sure I'm not the only person to notice that despite the flood of information that we have, the truth seems harder and harder to identify. Because what people in power have done is figured out that the easiest way for them to remain in power is to control narratives, to shape the truth, to shape what people believe. I remember visiting my grandparents probably 15 years ago now. I think it was before Hannah was born. And they recently got Fox News on their cable. And I never really remember them talking much about politics before, certainly not American politics. But I noticed something in my conversation that just, they seemed more pessimistic, more fearful of the world around them. I never really watched that kind of television. It just struck me that in my conversation with their worldview, that what they believed to be true about the world wasn't what I believed to be true about the world. Now, I might be naive about the world around me. I might be just too optimistic. I might just be more just generally hopeful as a person. My point is that it's easy for us to look at the world around us, to look at the flood of information, to look at how we can see narratives being shaped and ask that same question: what is truth? So here's how I want to tackle that question this morning. I want to look at the person of Jesus. Because Jesus reveals who he is to Pilate. He is a king, not of an earthly kingdom, but of a kingdom without end. He came to testify to the truth and to reveal himself as the ultimate truth through his life, through his death, and through his resurrection. God with us. Pilate weighed the threat of Jesus, the threat of the crowd forming outside his palace, the threat of the religious authority clearly angling to have this man killed. But truth, what is truth? It was secondary. Power, retaining it, ensuring that his and Rome's power would continue. That's what Pilate was concerned about. So he washed his hands and sealed Jesus' fate. Does pragmatism win over truth in our families, in our friendships, in our church? Do we wash our hands of our responsibility to truth because refusing to do so might cost us? As we look at this narrative this morning, as we look at this story, what do we take away? I think there's a few things. So firstly, as followers of Jesus, we can't compromise truth in the face of power. Because Jesus didn't. It's a temptation for any person with any kind of power to cling to that power at all costs. This can be true of politicians. It can be true of managers, of bosses. It can be true of pastors. It can be true of any of us. I remember we brought a speaker in once for Summit 54. It was a training event that the Youth Ministerial in Prince George put on to help train youth workers. And he was telling me that his wife worked in the provincial government. And he expressed to me a little bit of frustration that because she was a believer, there was a ceiling to how much she could advance in her role. Like he just was like, she'll never advance beyond this because she believes in Jesus. But what was the alternative? Compromise the truth about who she was, what she believed, about how she viewed the world, about how that wasn't something she was willing to do. And hear me, because I don't really believe that we are being persecuted in the same way that Christians throughout history have been persecuted. We're not meeting underground. We're meeting in public. We don't fear for our safety generally here on a Sunday morning because of our faith. But hear me, I'm not saying this. There may be a cost to our power and influence for following Jesus. And that truth must be more important. The temptation for anyone with any kind of power is to keep hold of that power, even at the cost of truth. We can't do that as followers of Jesus. That's the first application. Secondly, I think as followers of Jesus, we must recognize the limit of earthly power. Because Annas and Pilate couldn't stop Jesus. They did not stop Jesus. It's super tempting to try and seize earthly power to achieve what we perceive as spiritual good. Christians have tried that throughout history. Europe, for hundreds and hundreds of years, it was called Christendom. I think it's fair to say that the mix of political power and Christian faith was at best a mixed blessing. Political power makes enemies. Jesus says, love your enemies. Political power says, I know a way to make this better. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Political power makes earthly kingdoms. Jesus says, I am the king of a kingdom that is not of this world, that will never fade. Now, that's not to say that Faithful followers of Jesus can't make a difference in politics. It's not to say we shouldn't follow our conscience or get involved in politics at all. It's not what I'm saying. But it is to say that we need to understand that there is a limit to what it can accomplish. And we have to be careful about whose kingdom we're pursuing. No political leader, no political movement will save us. Only Jesus can. And the last thing I want us to see this morning is this. As followers of Jesus, we must cling to the truth. Jesus, in giving up his power, defeated sin and death forever. Jesus alone is the source of truth. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the king of a kingdom that no earthly power can touch. The God of the universe stepped into history, laid his power aside in the face of these earthly authorities, in the face of the political power of his day, to demonstrate the kind of power that would defeat sin and death forever. In order to do that, he had to give up his power. We must cling to the truth. What I mean by truth is broader than the truth about just the things we can observe. It's broader than even just moral truth, wrong and right behavior. It encompasses that, but it's more. It's the beauty and vastness of our God. It's the depth of his love for you and I. The truth that the God of the universe cares about us, and not only does he care about us, he pursues us and wants to be with us in relationship now and for eternity, living in his kingdom. Kingdom without end. Now and forever. We must cling to Jesus. Let's pray. God, thank you. Thank you that our purpose in this life is not confined to earthly realms. But that you've called us to something bigger, to something that will never fade, that will never end, and that's your kingdom. And God, I'm thankful that when faced with earthly power, with political agendas, God, that you gave up your power to demonstrate your power. And God, I'm thankful that you've rescued us, that you have redeemed us, that you have bought us through the death and resurrection of Jesus. And God, I'm thankful for your love this morning and for your truth. God, help us to be people of truth. God, help us to be people of you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.